Welcome to an overview of the Battle of Westport, the largest Civil War battle to take place west of the Mississippi River. The battle began in the early morning hours of Friday, October 21st, 1864, a few miles east of Independence, Missouri. The battle ended by mid-afternoon on Sunday, October 23rd, about 14 miles south of downtown Kansas City, Missouri, near the small town of New Santa Fe, located on the border between Kansas and Missouri. On August 3rd, 1864, the Confederate commander west of the Mississippi River, General Kirby Smith, orders Major General Sterling Price to organize all cavalry in Arkansas with the objective of invading Missouri. Price's objectives are to recruit men to fight for the Confederacy, capture St. Louis and its vast stores of military supplies, occupy Jefferson City, the state capital, and install a pro-Southern governor. On September 19, 1864, Price leads 12,000 Confederate cavalrymen into southeastern Missouri. He intends to use his Army of Missouri to reclaim the state for the Confederacy. The federal commander in Missouri, Major General William S. Rosecrans, scrambles to respond to Price's invasion. Rosecrans asks for and receives reinforcements and begins to fortify the defenses of St. Louis. Rosecrans sends reinforcements by rail to Fort Davidson in Pilot Knob, Missouri, and orders Missouri State Militia Cavalry across the state to come to his aid as quickly as possible. On September 27th, General Price decides to attack the federal defenders in Fort Davidson. The federal commander, Brigadier General Thomas Ewing Jr., organizes a stiff defense, and Price's attack, with heavy casualties, fails to capture the fort, and Federals escaped during the night. General Price now turns his attention to St. Louis. However, Rosecrans has had time to strengthen the city's defenses. Price decides not to attack St. Louis, instead turning west toward Jefferson City. In response, Rosecrans orders the Missouri State Militia Cavalry to converge on the state capital. Price's army reaches the outskirts of Jefferson City on October 7th. After some skirmishing, Price decides Jefferson City is too well defended and bypasses the city, continuing to move west. Rosecrans orders Major General Alfred Pleasonton to organize the Missouri State Militia Cavalry, who set out in pursuit of Price. Now that Price's army is heading west towards Kansas, the federal commander in the Department of Kansas, Major General Samuel R. Curtis, begins to marshal his forces to defend against an attack by Price. Curtis calls on Kansas Governor Thomas Kearny to call up the Kansas State Militia. On October 15th, Curtis organizes the Army of the Border, comprised of about 4,000 federal volunteer cavalry veterans and about 15,000 Kansas State militia. Curtis orders Major General James G. Blunt into Missouri at the head of the federal volunteer cavalry in order to make contact with Price's advance. After bypassing Jefferson City, Price continues to move west, attacking towns and capturing more and more supplies. By the middle of October, Price's entourage includes around 500 wagons filled with supplies, a herd of several thousand cattle, hundreds of civilian relatives of his men, and a significant number of Missouri guerrillas who have joined his army. On October 19th, Price moves through Waverly toward Lexington and encounters the forces commanded by Blunt. Price's advance attacks Blunt's men. Blunt mounts a stiff defense, but by the end of the day has fallen back to the Little Blue River, a few miles east of Independence, Missouri. Price occupies Lexington that night and will continue heading west in the morning. That night, Price considers his options. He is being pursued by thousands of Federal cavalry from the east, and waiting for him near Kansas City is an even larger Federal army. He has not achieved his goals of capturing St. Louis and Jefferson City. Now Price has to focus on getting his recruits and all those wagons safely back to Arkansas. On Thursday, October 20th, Price's command continues moving west. After marching another 20 miles or so, Price's army encamps on Fire Creek Prairie, about 4 miles east of the Little Blue River. After falling back from Lexington on the 19th, General Blunt follows the Lexington to Independence Road to its crossing of the Little Blue River. While scouting the past few days, Blunt had been impressed with the strong defensive position offered by the river at this point. Blunt believes he can stop Price's advance at the Little Blue, and so the Federals are there when Price reaches that river. Major General John S. Marmaduke's division of Price's army has the advance on Friday, October 21st. Marmaduke has to get control of the bridge over the Little Blue River so the wagons can cross. As he approaches the bridge, they are met by skirmish fire from Colonel Thomas Moonlight's 11th Kansas Cavalry. By 10 a.m., the Confederates have been able to push the Federal defenders more than a mile west of the Little Blue River. Overwhelming numbers forced Blunt to slowly withdraw west toward Independence, arriving around 4 p.m. and fighting the entire distance. That evening, the Federals withdraw through Independence, falling back to the Big Blue River, where General Curtis had been preparing the Federal defenses. That evening, Price's army moves in and occupies Independence. In preparing to defend against Price, General Curtis has decided to make his stand along the Big Blue River. He orders his chief engineer to fortify 3 locations. His first line of defense is going to be the Big Blue River. However, if he cannot hold there, Curtis plans to fall back to Kansas City and then across the Kansas River into Wyandotte, Kansas. Along the Big Blue River, the Kansas State Militia start cutting down trees and digging entrenchments at all the fords from the mouth of the Missouri River to about 15 miles upstream to Russell's Ford. Curtis is certain the Confederates will attack at the main ford on the Independence to Westport Road and deploys most of his forces at that point. But his maps are incomplete, and Curtis fails to prepare a defense at Hinkle's Ford, just downriver from Brush Creek. It's Friday evening, October 21st, and Price's 500 wagon train is parked just southwest of Independence near Rock Creek. Price must get his army and wagon train, full of plunder, back to southern Arkansas. When the train is on the move, it stretches for miles, making an inviting target for his enemies. It also slows Price, making it more difficult to escape to Arkansas. Price decides to put the Big Blue River between his train and Pleasanton's cavalry. He decides to cross the wagon train at Byram's Ford, continue down the Harrisonville Road, cross again at Russell's Ford, and continuing on, crossing on the Red Bridge over the Big Blue on its way to New Santa Fe. Price orders Brigadier General Joe Shelby to attack Byram's Ford on Saturday morning. Marmaduke guards the eastern outskirts of Independence to stop Pleasanton's pursuit from the east. Brigadier General William L. Cabell's brigade guards the wagon train. Supporting Cabell's efforts are several thousand unarmed recruits who make up a brigade commanded by Colonel Charles H. Tyler. At dawn on Saturday, October 22nd, Shelby sends Colonel Sidney Jackman's brigade to fake an attack at the main ford across the Big Blue River. While Jackman draws the attention of the Federals, Shelby accompanies the Iron Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General M. Jeff Thompson, and launches the attack at Byram's Ford. By 9 a.m., Colonel Charles R. Jennison, commanding 1st Brigade, Army of the Border, has less than 1,000 men deployed in the entrenchments at Byram's Ford. Over the previous day or so, men from the Kansas State Militia dug entrenchments and cut down trees to block the road and the ford. Jennison's command consists of the 15th Kansas Cavalry, a detachment from the 3rd Wisconsin Cavalry, some Kansas State Militia, and Barker's battery. At 10 a.m., Thompson launches the attack. Well armed and well entrenched, Jennison holds off the Confederate attack for several hours. General Shelby sends detachments both upriver and downriver to find other crossings. The Confederates find the undefended Hinkle's Ford downriver. They cross there and come crashing into Jennison's left flank. Around 3 p.m., Jennison withdraws from his entrenchments and begins a 5-mile-long fighting withdrawal back to the Kansas state line. Late that afternoon, Price's huge wagon train begins moving from Independence down the Byram's Ford Road and crosses over the ford. At the extreme right flank of the Curtis defense is Russell's Ford, near present-day Hickman Mills. Guarding this crossing is a brigade of Kansas State Militia under the command of Brigadier General Melvin S. Grant, a wholesale grocer with little military experience. Around 9 a.m. on Saturday, October 22nd, Grant receives a dispatch from Curtis warning him to be on the lookout for Price's army. Grant splits his forces and sends whole regiments out patrolling east of the river. After the Confederate breakthrough at Byram's Ford, Shelby moves quickly to consolidate the Confederate position there. While Thompson is pushing Jennison west, Shelby orders Jackman's brigade upriver to get control of Russell's Ford. Just after 3 p.m., General Grant and about 300 men from the 2nd Kansas State Militia Infantry are returning from their patrol and receive an order to withdraw to Westport. Approaching the Mockbee Farm near present-day 79th and Holmes, the militia comes upon Jackman's cavalry. Grant orders the 2nd Kansas State Militia into line of battle. The 2nd Kansas State Militia Infantry withstands repeated charges by Jackman's battle-hardened Confederate cavalry. But in the end, the militiamen are overwhelmed, with virtually every member being killed or captured. Around 3 p.m., Major General Pleasanton's cavalry division reaches the eastern outskirts of Independence. Having just returned from escorting Price's wagon train down to Byram's Ford, Brigadier General Cabell quickly orders his brigade to support the Confederate rearguard resistance to Pleasanton's advance. Pleasanton orders Brigadier General John McNeil and Brigadier General John Sanborn to launch a coordinated attack from the east and northeast against Cabell's Confederates. An intense firefight erupts as the two opposing forces fight from house to house in the streets of Independence. During the fighting, Cabell is nearly captured, but escapes by mounting his horse and jumping over a piece of artillery and running through the passage of a double log cabin and jumping the yard fence. The Confederates fall back toward Byram's Ford. General Pleasonton launches his attack at Byram's Ford on Sunday, October 23rd. Facing them is General Marmaduke's division, who are in the entrenchments occupied the day before by the Federals. The first attack, made by the brigade of Colonel John Phillips, bogs down until they are supported by Colonel Edward Winslow's brigade. The Federals fight their way across the river and slowly move up across hundreds of yards of open ground until reaching the base of a rock outcrop around 9 a.m. The Federals remain pinned down by the heavy artillery and small arms fire from the Confederates located on the high ground above them. Around 11 a.m., Winslow orders the men in his brigade up and through the rocky ledge in an attack. His attack is supported by Phillips on the left, and hand-to-hand fighting ensues. Running low on ammunition, Marmaduke orders his Confederates to withdraw to the west and south down the Harrisonville Road, present-day Prospect Avenue, toward Russell's Ford. The collapse of the Confederate line on the Big Blue exposes the right flank of the remainder of Price's army fighting along Brush Creek, present-day Plaza. About the same time Pleasonton attacks at Byram's Ford, General Blunt launches the Federal attack against the Confederate position south of Brush Creek near the Warnell House. General Shelby launches a counterattack, forcing the Federals to fall back north of the creek. But after 2 hours of intense combat, the Confederates are low on ammunition and have to wait for a resupply to be brought forward. Late in the morning, General Curtis brings reinforcements forward to launch a second attack up the hill against the Confederates. However, George Toman, a local farmer living near present-day 55th and Prospect, tells Curtis about a narrow path running along the bluffs on the south side of Brush Creek. Following this trail with Toman in the lead, Curtis arrives near present-day 55th Street and Ward Parkway with artillery and opens fire on the extreme left flank of Shelby's Confederates. Shelby falls back to deal with this new threat, and Blunt leads the Federals up the hill into present-day Luce Park to launch another attack. Pleasonton's breakthrough at Byram's Ford, coupled with the Union flanking movement by Curtis and Blunt's advance, forces Shelby to make a fighting withdrawal. While the rest of Price's army is retreating south, Shelby successfully holds off the combined Federal forces behind the stone walls which run from east to west on the edge of the farm fields near present-day Forest Hill Cemetery. By 1 p.m., Shelby is able to pull out and rejoin Price to the south. After Shelby captures Byram's Ford on Saturday, Brigadier General William L. Cabell sends Price's huge wagon train moving from Independence that can now cross at Byram's Ford. The wagon train crosses there, turns south at the Harrisonville Road, and then crosses at Russell's Ford. It's around 9 a.m. on Sunday, October 23rd, when Cabell notices a large cavalry force off to the northeast. Cabell sends a dispatch to Price that the train is in danger. The cavalry force is the brigade of Brigadier General John McNeill, who Pleasanton ordered to head down the Santa Fe Trail and cut off Price and capture the wagon train. McNeill is on the Blue Ridge opposite Russell's Ford when he spots the Confederate wagon train in the distance. But most disconcerting to McNeill are the thousands of cavalry McNeill sees escorting the wagons. McNeill believes he has stumbled upon Price's entire army. Feeling hopelessly outnumbered, McNeill is not sure what to do. Price reacts with great alarm to Cabell's dispatch and heads south with his escort to take personal command of the wagon train, arriving around 10 a.m. Price deploys his unarmed recruits into line of battle, hoping to fool the enemy. Price also orders Cabell's brigade forward in a skirmish line between the enemy and the wagon train. As McNeill watches, thousands of enemy troops deploy in line of battle. The wagon train continues moving southwest toward New Santa Fe near present-day 123rd State line. McNeill continues to hesitate, but eventually sends a skirmish line forward in the early afternoon. Nothing is accomplished, and the wagon train escapes. Now that Price's army is in full retreat and moving south, the two Union commanders meet around 2:30 p.m. on Sunday, October 23rd, just north of Indian Creek at the farmhouse of a local man named Thomas. The Federal commanders decide to release the Kansas State Militia from service. Blunt's and Pleasanton's cavalry divisions will continue to pursue Price's army. Because he is the senior officer present, Curtis assumes overall command of the joint forces. The Union cavalry will continue the pursuit in the morning. Confederate Brigadier General M. Jeff Thompson recalled that first night after their defeat at the Battle of Westport.
We moved slowly to the middle fork of the Grand River, reaching there after nightfall to find the trains camped in the greatest confusion. I at last found a portion of our wagons, and we here passed a rather gloomy night. But from the fatigue occasioned by the constant fighting for the past 3 days, I slept as soundly as if there were not a foeman in 1,000 miles. On the morning of the 24th, we lost several hours in getting the train untangled and forming the brigade, for in the confusion of the night before, men and wagons, artillery and refugees were so mixed that it was nearly impossible to unravel them.
The Federal pursuit catches up to Price's rear guard just north of the Merdazine River around 1 a.m. on Tuesday, October 25th. It is dark and a heavy rain is falling. At this point, the military road passes between two hills, referred to as mounds. The Federals skirmish with the Confederate rear guard and drive the Confederates off the hills and across the river. The Federals capture about 100 prisoners, a number of wagons, and 2 artillery pieces. The climax to Price's raid arrives a few hours later in Kansas at the point where the military road crosses Mine Creek. The Confederate wagon train is strung out for miles on the military road, moving south as fast as possible. Leading the Federal advance are the brigades commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Benteen and Colonel John Phillips. As they crest the hill north of Mine Creek, they see 2 Confederate divisions ahead of them, deploying into line of battle. They are the divisions of Major General John Marmaduke and Major General James Fagan. Benteen orders his men to charge the Confederates and is supported by Phillips. The Federals break through the Confederate line, routing them. The Confederates turn and run, heading south as quickly as possible. Generals Marmaduke and Cabell are captured. Price recalls Brigadier General Joe Shelby who is on his way to capture Fort Scott. Shelby returns to fight two additional rearguard actions near the Little Osage River and then just north of the Marmaton River at Charlotte's Farm. That night, Price orders all non-essential wagons destroyed. The Confederate Army is now in full retreat. On October 28th, there is another fight near the town of Newtonia, Missouri. This time Major General Blunt attacks the Confederate rear guard, but Shelby's men are able to repulse the attack. The Federals call off the pursuit after Price crosses the Arkansas River on November 7th. Price continues his retreat through the Indian Territory and into Texas before arriving at Lanesport, Arkansas on December 2nd. Price has traveled 1,434 miles during his expedition.